Okay, I think perhaps we should get started.
George, did you start that recording?
No.
Oh, that's strange. Because I didn't either. Anyway, the ghost in the machine, I guess.
That's good. Okay, so bear with me a second. Okay, so let's crack on. So the agenda, there's a number of people that are new to what we've been doing. So I hope people will bear with me. I'm just going to give a quick update on what we've been doing over the last couple of years. We can then have a discussion around the survey report, which you may not have had a chance to look at yet. We've then got Matt Wilkie, who's a specialist in asset management, giving some practical examples of why we need a golden thread. Then Paul Oakley is going to explain some of the tools that we've been creating to help digital handover, to improve the quality of digital handover. We then want to talk about the Golden Thread Task Force, which is the group. Many of you have already joined up to the task force, but obviously there's an opportunity if you wish to participate actively in what we think needs to be done, then there's an opportunity for you to do so. Given that's the case, what would you like to do? Would you like to be a mentor or somebody that's learning? I mean, clearly we're all learning all the time, but or maybe you're a client or a contractor and you want advice. So what we want to try and do is just understand if people want to be active in the task force, what do you want to do? And then we've got task force meetings scheduled, dedicated task force meetings coming up in June. So one of the things I wanted to just give you as a background, we've been engaged in with the whole golden thread stuff since the start, and that's that's a comment that I got last year from MHCLG, which I think's really helpful to sort of encourage people. And just last week, I got this from Tim Galloway, saying that we're on the right path. So just to let you know, it's not just a talking shop. This is an example of one of the resources that we've got. It's a Miro board that the group has set up for people to engage in this and ask questions, because everybody's interpreting the regulations slightly differently. And we feel that collectively we can get there more easily if everybody's on the same page. So you can sign up to the Miro board. If you want to be part of that, just put in the chat, just write in the chat Miro board, and we'll send you the link. Just to explain BIM for housing, if you've not been involved with it, we took over about 5 years ago, and we've broken it up into, rather than being about 3D modeling, it's about better information management. And we've got groups that have been looking at ways that we can improve the flow of information through the design, construction, and operations process by creating certain resources. And we've done that through pulling together subject matter experts we were asked to join and support the Golden Thread Initiative, and we've run hundreds of well, so yeah, we've actually run dozens of workshops with hundreds of people involved. Actually, people who many of them competitors sitting around tables, or in most cases, it's been on teams sharing knowledge and sharing expertise, which we capture in publications. This is all voluntary. Everybody's doing this voluntarily, but the information's there if you're interested in downloading it. And the sort of quality of information, it's real deep dive stuff. So, for example, on fire doors, we've got a breakdown of not just what the fire door is, but what it's doing, what risk is it mitigating, what do people do to fire doors to stop them from working, and also what information is required. And we then went on to produce a standardized fire door inspection manual, which again, we had 60 or 70 people who are fire door experts contribute to this. And we're now doing the same for fire doors, fire dampers, and fire stopping. So this is all good stuff that we think places us in a good situation to reduce delays. So how are we actually doing with that? Well, what's interesting is we've done some audits on projects where the quality of handover information hasn't been great. We're checking against the criteria that is in Regulation 38, for example. We're identifying on a project, this is one project, you can see how much is missing at handover. So all of that work that everybody's been putting in hasn't actually been, it's not being realized in some ways. And part of the reason for that is because the way information is still being presented isn't in a usable, machine readable way. A human can read that document, albeit this is this was in the handover information. You can see here that there's still a lot of stuff that is still questioned. So, no smoke seal, or that should be a 60-minute, not a 30-minute. And that sort of thing doesn't really help. When we get that in O&M information, what we really need is for it to be machine readable. So that, for example, rather than being in a spreadsheet, it ought to be in a form that we can tie together electronically, so that you don't have to then look at a drawing, for example, and then work out what the reference key is on it. All of that information is being produced by computers. So we really should, I think, as a standard, encourage people to provide it in a machine readable format. And similarly, one of our experts here, Cliff Neal, did a presentation at the last forum meeting, which I'd really urge you to go and look at because it's a real masterclass. But here, for example, he's illustrating how on this drawing you've got a reflected ceiling plan, and because of the information, there's an exit sign there, but you can't actually see it because it's obscured. And these are the sorts of things that we think it could be picked up when people are doing audits, and we should be pushing back to the supply chain saying that we shouldn't be accepting that. Because otherwise, how do you know that you've got the right information? So I'm going to just step into the poll that we had. We ran a poll at the last forum meeting, and it was quite informative. So, for example, one of the challenges that we've got is that everybody in this room, I think, probably is keen to improve the quality of information at handover. I think everybody, the fact that you've committed an hour to get involved in this now, and you've spent many hours previously, indicates that you're bothered, that you want to see some improvements. But in many cases, you're constrained within your organization by the fact that senior management perhaps don't understand and perceive the importance of it, or other organizations that you have to engage with, they also don't understand the value. So we asked this question, and I think it was really quite telling that 89% felt that the senior management were not fully aware of their duties under the new legislation, and therefore the importance of the golden thread. We also asked how confident people are that they're going to get the right fire safety information at handover. And that's even worse. 92% said that they weren't, they didn't believe that they would get it, which I think is a wake up call. And I think probably a reason why a lot of the submissions are being turned down at Gateway 2. We've then got the question of, do we think the contents of the fire and emergency file, which is that's the ongoing responsibility for keeping it up to date, 43% didn't believe that their organizations were doing that. And in terms of O&M information, which is where a lot of this information is often held, 72% felt that they weren't keeping stuff up to date, which is no massive surprise to anybody in the industry. We also thought, well, a logical time to check to see if the fire and emergency file is fit for purpose should be when a fire risk assessment's done. So we asked that question: should the fire risk assessment include checking the fire and emergency file? And 95% said it should. Be interesting to know if you've had fire risk assessments, whether that is actually in the scope of what you're asking people to do, because in certainly the feedback I've had is that there's often a race to the bottom in terms of tendering for fire risk assessments, and therefore people that are carrying them out, who have probably won it on a competitive tender, may not have the time to actually do that work. So that's something that we ought to be trying to raise the bar. That's our thinking. And should the fire and emergency file include a floor plan with the locations of the safety critical assets? Now that may seem obvious, but I think it's very, very common that people don't have that floor plan with things like fire dampers, smoke dampers, fire doors, and fire stopping indicated on them. Should there be a schedule of the safety critical assets and what products are installed? Again, 92% said yes, they should, but I'd be interested to see whether that's actually the case. I think you as a community could perhaps check that. We then had a couple of questions about the regulations. So, do you need to inform the regulator when a fire door is replaced? I know this is a wide topic. This is a widely discussed topic, but actually, the answer to that we found was yes, you do need to inform the regulator, but 55% of people didn't think that that was necessary. So I think that's now I'm not an expert in this at all, but the people that are the experts say that you do need to inform the regulator, albeit perhaps retrospectively. And another interesting one was, how frequently should AOVs be tested to ensure they're operational? And we had a wide range of responses to that, as you can see. And only 20% of the people got that right. Be interesting to know whether you know what that was. And then, in fact, actually, on that one, do you want to put in the chat what you think it is? Should it be 6 monthly, 3 monthly, 1 monthly? If you're involved at all, if you're a responsible person or you're involved at all with AOVs or smoke vents, how frequently should we check to make sure that they're working? I'll give you the answer later, if you've not worked it out from the 20%. And then finally, um, do we believe that a third party should be looking at an impartial person be looking at the safety critical information before a gateway so that you can check to make sure that what you're putting forward to the regulator is not going to get picked up. So broadly, that's I'd be interested. Has anybody got any comments at all on the poll? Do you think it's been useful for us to do that?
George, I think it's quite astounding how BIM for Housing and the forum that's been created is having to fill the gaps for the lack of guidance from elsewhere. There's one comment I've made.
Thank you. Has anybody? I can't see if people have got their hands up. Could you just can anybody else see that? Does there anybody want to make any comment? Thank you, Howard. Okay, let's press on. Matt Wilkie. Matt, are you ready to give us a couple of observations?
Yeah, just give me a second because I'm on a different laptop, so I was trying to share my screen.
I've got your images if you wish.
Okay, you can put whichever one because obviously it's 2 images. I did a quick one today. So this one is where's the front door, which sounds a bit silly, but what you have on, say, large clinical buildings is they have automatic doors in the east, the west, north, south. But what you'll have is the receptionist at whatever door will say the front door. So when you start getting issues with the door, you may have one door that's faulty, but because they get reported as different doors, you're assuming you got multiple door issues. When if you just replace the one door, all your call outs, repairs would suddenly just disappear overnight because and sometimes it's actually simple things like the wind is actually blowing through the building, affecting the door actually working. So because you don't know which door's which, it is quite a regular occurrence problem and a costly one if it's not managed and actually understanding which door is which, because obviously if you've got different contractors also attending, they're going to spend time looking for a door. They assume they fixed the right door, and then they get a call back saying the door's not working and it's a completely different door. So it's important that they're tagged correctly, but also that people actually understand the layout of the building. So when you go north, south, east, west, the help desk don't know the difference between a door, what that means. It needs to be specific to that door that is recognized at site level, the help desk level, and a contractor level, which is why things like barcoding and tagging is useful, the same as having updated drawings with the specific locations, so you know not every door's the same door. I'll leave that one as that one because it sounds quite simple, but you wouldn't believe how much this actually costs. It's phenomenal. And this one is where is the door? What I'm finding is that a lot of the guys asked to do the fire door surveys. They can be internal engineers, they can be specialist contractors. They often aren't given the drawings. So one of the problems you get is when the doors are originally specified, they come from an architect's viewpoint. So they just want an FD30 with a specific style, design, whatever. It's not quoting the manufacturer and it's not quoting what is going to be ending up there. What you get is like FD30 in the basics. But once it starts going from build, those numbers don't change on the drawing. So door F, like for example, there one FD2 is it's not actually a fire door; it's actually first floor door 2. But these are the sort of things you get with naming conventions as well, because people will change things. But the important bit thing is the original drawings got the exact locations already with the drawing numbers on it, and everything should carry through on that as the golden thread. That you get your specifications from the manufacturer, confirm it back to the architect so that the doors are actually where they should be. Align the two, so now you've got everything from the hinges to the intermittent strips to the D handles, whatever's on the door. Okay, and we want to go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of hands up. Pierre, do you want to go first?
Okay, the first thing, Matt, we're living in a digital world, and one of the things is you need some basic rules. It's like a GA plan. If you turn it upside down, shake it, whatever falls out shouldn't have been in the GA plan. In the same way, the door numbering, the door identification actually should be identical across the entire spectrum, from the white van to the big tier 1 contractor, simply because that same tier 1 contractor is also going to subcontract stuff out. And so it's a cascade in two ways to sort it out. I do find all too often is that we just have laid too many different standards. And if we start international and come down eventually to the practice should be picking up all the previous standards. So filtering it out, just making it far more deliberate, far more consistent.
Sorry, Pierre, I was getting on to that point. I haven't got that far yet.
Sorry, thank you.
I was just explaining the problem first. We haven't got that. AM, Anna. Sorry, I just
Hi
got
everyone.
on the screen.
I just wanted to say actually, for example, for our residential projects, doors, we work on doors to so much detail that I don't think it's I don't think that the issue is generally in naming. I think the issue is more to do with handing over information that is actually then slightly stripped back to what's essential for the maintenance. Does that make sense? So when you're at that point, when you're handing over the door schedule to the manufacturer, to the supplier, the architectural door schedule will already have so many categories that are describing the door, and then the manufacturer will take it on and they will make it even more detailed. So there's no lack of data at that point in time. What happens afterwards is what doesn't get done very carefully. I'm seeing in practice, which is that doors that are at that point hugely populated with information. I was just trying to quickly find an example, but I'm happy to put it in a chat in a minute. Those doors then need to be stripped back to an essential amount of information that is important to the user, to the maintenance person, to the to those who will be looking at the door later on. So it's not a lack of information. It's somebody needs to be involved who knows what needs to be stripped away. Because you don't need every single bit of information from the ironmongery company, from the service, the access company. There's many people working on a door. It's not just one company. And the architects will capture that in a kind of design way, and then the manufacturers will capture that in their own way as a kind of fabrication level of detail.
I'll just, before you jump in, Pierre, I'll just finish because I only got halfway through, so I was going to cover all these bits in. So my point being is, you get a fire door specialist come in, and they're often not given the drawings, so they don't have the drawing numbers. So they then start doing 1 to 200, so that no longer correlates to the building, because they've used a different numbering system. And I'm finding that quite common, that then you get another contractor in who then uses a different system because they weren't given the last set of details either. And then you've got a problem with the audit trail as well. So the reason I was bringing up taking it from construction is that we have so much information at the beginning, but it sort of starts getting watered down as people stop using the drawing numbers that correlate it back to the original. Because the advantage you've got, if it correlates where it's a unified numbering system, like you're saying, if you've got too much data, you still know it's door 21. So the bits you want is still door 21. So you can filter out just the pieces you need, but other people may still want to know what the size of a D handle is and its specification. because they want to change, say, 50 in the building, but you may not be interested in that. You may only be interested in like the fire safety, etc. The whole point is the golden thread starts at the beginning of the specification, then it's on to the what's actually installed, and then trying to keep it maintained, which if you keep the numbers the same from the beginning, you can correlate it all the way back. And that's what I was trying to say, is that's where the golden thread starts. And that's so, like you're saying, you get too much information. That's correct as well, but if you've still got all the information, you can select the bits you want because it's still door 21. You may not need it all, but you still know where Jaws 21 is. Sorry, I'll be quiet now because I think I've explained it. George, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, Phil's got his hand up first, so if you go first, Phil.
Thank you, George. Hi, everyone. I just take you up on where the golden thread starts, because I would suggest it starts with the manufacturer.
But the specification of what should be there started with the architect.
What information does the architect use in order to identify the correct product from the manufacturer?
Well, they'll die. For example, it'd be fairly basic, like where's an FD30, FD60, or whatever. But the point is that specification is sitting on that drawing, so you actually want to keep it there because you want to re-verify from once it goes to manufacturer. You then want to re-verify that it was actually installed and that's what was put there. So it sort of ties back to what the original specification for the building was.
Yeah, but we've also got to consider that some specifications would almost specify an outright standard product off the shelf. So assume it's electrical isolator that's available now, it's on the shelf now.
Yeah.
Are we not missing a trick by not tying it back through an ID to the manufacturer item?
Well, it's still got the original location, everything from when it was the design stage. So I think it'd be still keep it where it started. You can still update it with the manufacturer's information, because if it's wrong for some reason, like it's underrated or whatever, you want to go back to the original build that put the wrong thing in.
What about say we have an example where there's a product recall?
Well, that's why you still need the manufacturer's detail, but it's still tied in. You've still got the specification. You don't lose one. You keep both. It's just keeping them together.
Yeah, I just think the language that we use around this is important, and we should stress that where possible and where practical, we should be using manufacturer identifiers. Otherwise, then you create a gap between. You assume you start at design stage. You don't. You start at manufacturer stage. The product's already there, available, and it's being marketed into the industry. We should be using those as well as against products like door sets, which are manufactured specifically for a project.
Can I just jump in on that, because I think absolutely I understand what you're saying, Phil. Right, the point that Matt's making, which I really strongly agree with, is we're confusing there the difference between an asset and a product.
Correct.
The asset is going to be there for the next 50 years because they need a door, and that door is a door that will then need to be maintained. So there needs to be a door, even if it's replaced with a different product, 3 or 4 times during the life of that asset. So I think and just picking up on what Anna was saying, the challenge that we've said right from the start is that we need as much information as each of the different stakeholders needs to consume to do things properly. But by creating it in a machine readable form, we can switch off the levels of detail that we don't need. So therefore, the different stakeholders can get that filtered back information, but we don't lose it, and that's really important.
Yeah, but I think again, sorry, and I'll let others speak in a moment. The distinction is important that a product becomes an asset. So the golden thread starts with the product, and then it becomes the asset. And if we don't capture that as part of this, the language we're using.
No, Phil, that's fundamentally not right. The golden thread starts with the performance of the thing that needs to do the job, right? It's then satisfied by a manufacturer's product.
Not in
Yeah.
all cases.
Maybe not in all
But the
cases.
reality is it's done the other way. That's what I'm trying to stress. They don't. A lot of items are purchased not based on performance. They're based on price and availability. And I'm not talking about complex products sometimes, or things that are technical or come under a safety criteria. I'm just talking about mundane items that just have a life cycle and need replacing and maintaining.
Okay, let's park that now, if I may, Phil. Paul Oakley. I'm sorry, we've only got an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, it starts with the requirements from the clients, which are then generally satisfied by a designer defining a specification against those requirements. But what we've missed out is the difference between components and types, because mapping types, particularly to manufacturers' models, is a way that the things should map across and be more consistent. So it's having the instance in terms of map to a particular type, and then the type will then generally refer to a manufactured product. And if you can basically make sure your types are as close to the manufactured product information, it's much easier to deal with that mapping.
Okay, we'll park that now if we may. Paul, can you run through the digital handover piece?
You can see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a repeat of what I did at the other presentation, but this is a significant construction project with all the BIM experts involved in terms of winning BIM contractors, information management consultants, all following ISO 19650 and producing COBie, and all supposed to be experts in terms of the delivery of this. But the reality was that they followed a typical sort of Autodesk methodology of the architects produced one Revit file, although it was 3 separate buildings. And so each discipline then just did one Revit file and put the whole lot together. So there was absolutely no understanding that actually these are 3 buildings and actually 3 different facilities. So having one COBie file, one zip was handed over with all the documentation and no metadata in terms of attributes about the documentation was provided. So they didn't consider how the buildings were going to be managed, operated, used, etc., as part of their handover to the asset management team. The other big thing was they handed over basically a record of the construction project. They did not hand over the documentation needed to maintain and operate the building. And there were 17,000 files that were handed over, including 1,000 concrete test cube results, plus loads of other information about piling and other things, which was not really relevant to asset management, but would be required as part of a record of the building. As part of the handed over information, there was two chunks of stuff. There was project-specific documentation. A lot of the design documentation, such as the drawing files, etc., was named as BS or ISO 19650 using the BS options. But then there was lots of other construction documentation that was handed over that actually did not have any proper naming conventions. And then we had all the other information, the generic sort of industry information, such as manufacturers' trade literature, all the certificates, etc., which basically did not follow any standard naming conventions, and therefore really fell out of being able to document and deal with that within the sort of the standard folders, structures, etc. Again, they replicated folders throughout. So they created a building 1, building 2, building 3 under fabric, and then the architects also had a building 1, 2, 3, and electrical. So there was multiple levels of building 1, 2, 3, down maybe 3, 4 levels, which basically created excessive folder paths, and caused issues in terms of I could only unzip it to a single character folder in my root, because otherwise I blew the 256 character limit. Within the work packages, they use the subcontractor's name to identify the work packages. And it wasn't just the fact that the folders use those, even the O&M file itself just had project name onm.pdf. And even when you open that PDF, on the front cover, it didn't give you the name of the work package.
Sorry, Chris, could you mute your microphone, please?
Yeah, so actually finding specific work package information was a real problem. Within the zips, as it came out of one of the standard sort of CDE solutions, it concatenated the ISO 19650 identifier, the description, status, and the revision. But things like status had things like, A5 suitable for RIBA stage 5 approval, 35 additional characters, which are not really needed as part of the string. So again, this caused all sorts of problems in terms of the naming issues. And because they concatenated things like the descriptions within the CDE use things like commas and alpha sans, etc. So when we tried to rezip things up to put them up to solutions, they were illegal characters. So basically the zips failed and wouldn't allow us to deal with stuff like that. So we had to do quite a bit of renaming of things to be able to deal with it. So instead of just basically getting a selection of documents and putting them into the asset management solution, we had this whole process of really having to go through everything, breaking it down into the 3 separate facilities in terms of buildings 1, 2, 3. We had to rename the folders, so based on the actual packages. Fortunately, within the main contractor's O&M, he had provided a list of the package contractors and the packages they were working on. So at least then we could do the mapping and pass those things over. But to help us deal with this, we wrote little routines to basically go through the zip files, extract all the documentation in each of the different folders into a massive big Excel file, which we could then use to manipulate in the files and extract metadata out of them. So we're able to, part of it would have an old name and a new name. So we knew what the old name was. We're going to record that as an attribute, and then we're going to rename it, getting rid of the special characters and reducing things like the suitability codes, etc. We also used a series of pick lists so we could decompose the ISO 19650 naming. So we knew that -A- was going to be architecture if it had an A. From that, we knew which building, because the ZXX001 was building 1, 04 was the full floor, etc. DR was a drawing, AAA was the name of the company. So from all of these, we could basically extract attributes that we could then put into the system to hold against each of the documents and deal with them that way. And then also we could find a typical description from where that's sort of set within the file name, and also from the file extension we could work out the type of, again, from a pick list we could then populate those as additional attributes. So it allowed us to go through those. Certain things like the legal owners, from the names that were covered, we could do that from the second field, from the pick lists, but sometimes we had to go back on the other documentation and look at the original folder name in terms of what it was from there. If we'd have had a document issue sheet, obviously a lot of this information would have been available for us, or even Kobe. If there'd been a document sheet with Kobe, a lot of the information in terms of the description as a file, the name of the file, who it's created by, those sorts of things would have made it a lot easier for doing a lot of this stuff. But these were not included as part of it. The form of information on a lot of elements was certificate CE, but actually there are so many certificates that get handed over. Having it identified as a certificate is pretty useless. So actually we realised that actually the PM table from Uniclass 2015 actually had quite a good detailed breakdown of the types of certificates and other documentation that we could use. So by using that, we could get down to specific types of certificates, which actually allowed us to filter the information much more efficiently to be able to find the sort of stuff that we're looking at. So I think the whole issue on this is there's a massive cost in terms of the ongoing maintenance, finding information. It's been raised throughout the last century in terms of the issues with design and construction, but also in asset management, that finding the most up-to-date current information is always the problem. So the amount of time and effort that we spend constructing things, we really need to make sure we hand over the right information with sufficient metadata so that people can use it and find it. We can do the sort of exercises we're doing, but really it's all about reducing time in finding the information, providing the trusting it again. So we didn't have originally we had multiple versions of documents and different revisions and things like this, which shouldn't be handed over to the asset management team. They just want the latest up to date. And also capturing things like the history and audit trail of things, which may hold some other specific information, was the sort of stuff we dealt with it. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but it'd be much better if this was handed over correct in the first place and we weren't needing to do the sort of exercises we are on job projects. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, so as far as this is concerned, what we want to do is to identify anybody within this group, and obviously we've already got people that have signed up for the Golden Thread Task Force. If you're interested in what Paul's just been through there, if you could put your name in the put digital handover into the chat, then we can include you in that process. And really, what we're now doing is folding the digital handover into the Golden Thread Task Force, because what we want to do is identify people that actually want to be active in this process and manage that process through. So have we got people that are interested in actively engaging? If you've already put your name down for the Golden Thread Task Force, you don't need to do it again. You can do by all means, so we don't miss you. But if you're interested in being part of the task force and perhaps tapping into some of the tools that Paul's just shown you, then please do so. Richard, is there anything you want to cover on that before I go on?
No, I don't think so. That's fine. You're going to go into the task force now, yeah?
Yeah. What I'm going to do is what I'm going to do, not in any detail, but really help people understand what we're trying to do in terms of the task force. So I'll skip into to do that if I may.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there could be some people in here who want to get involved in that.
Yes. Well, there's quite a few that already are.
Sure, absolutely
right. Okay. So essentially, what we've got is a situation where you've probably seen this, and some of you are probably involved in projects that are being held up. But a lot of these projects are being held up at Gateway 2 because of missing or flawed information. And I got this last week where 50% of the projects were rejected because they didn't have the right fire safety information, which is quite a staggering statistic, I think, in today's world. And obviously, we've also got a situation where it's not uncommon for organizations, asset management organizations, to have to survey brand new buildings to produce an asset list to maintain, which I think is quite telling as well. And we've obviously there's a lot of real strong work that's been going on to try and put classification and standardization against things, but we're still having the problems that Paul was indicating there. And part of the reason for it is that we're still not following the basics. So this is an old graphic, but it's what fundamentally everybody should be working to. This is how Kobe is operating. And the point is, rather than wait till the end, there should be staged checks to see if the information that's needed is actually being provided, and that needs to be a progressive validation. So what we are trying to do is follow that through. I'll come over to you in a second, Liam. So the principle that we're promoting is the golden thread, and it can mean lots of things to different people, but the consistent thing is that the building and all the systems in it need to be considered as a single system. So, and it's also the fact that the parts of the building and the components need to work together. So many of you will have seen this before, but I think it's still worth reiterating that the purpose of it is the fire breaks out in a kitchen, it's generating smoke. How do we protect the people that are in the stairwell, in the common areas, from being suffocated? And there's a number of different ways that's done. We've got compartmentation. So there's a range of different component elements that need to go to make up that compartmentation. So the firewalls themselves are made up of lots of different elements. Sorry, can't switch it off. So therefore, the it's not just whether the fire doors are good; it's whether all of the elements in that wall are good. And therefore, what we need to be doing is making it so that the smoke control systems can kick in, detection and signage. So the whole point about the golden thread is all of those things needs to be working together. And when we're doing audits of handover information, we need all of that information to be located properly so that we can know where, for example, a fire door is, but also what the product is, which is the point that Phil was making, and also what spaces it's protecting. So the golden thread is there to really bring together a whole range of different things. So if people are doing inspections using various different software applications, and this is the point that Matt was making earlier, it needs to refer back to that unique asset, because otherwise we've got no way of managing things. And therefore, the legislation, this is from Regulation 38, it actually says that there should be an as-built plan that shows where all those assets are. And the regulator recognised that that was possibly going to be a challenge. So even for in normal standard buildings now, the responsible person has to sign a legal declaration to say that they've had all the information they need to operate the building safely. Now, how many clients, how many contractors are aware of the fact they have to do that? Sorry, it's delaying. So an example of that is here. The detail that's needed is here. So, for example, if the fire causes a ductwork to collapse, what it's important to know where all the fire dampers are, so that you can check to make sure they've got a breakaway joint. Otherwise, it can pull the smoke damper out the wall. And this is just one example of how that can be done really quite effectively. I think this is a combination of different software applications that are acting together to provide that golden thread. So we've got the Revit model, we've got a schedule of all the assets, we've got the manufacturer's product details here, so you can drill into that and see which. I think that's probably a Swagon there. Or it may not. It's a Lindab, actually, I think.
It's Lindab, that one, George.
Yeah, that's not one of yours then, is it?
No.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I know the opposition, don't worry.
So the important thing about this is that we can find very low cost ways of capturing that information. So 360 photos, for example, it doesn't need the model to be completed with all of the detailed information. A 360 photo can do it, and that means it's so much easier to be able to navigate around it, and it can be kept up to date. So the golden thread isn't just about design and construction at all. It's about the life of the building and being able to connect together all of the documentation that's needed. So I guess so that isn't about what software is being used, by the way. It's about the interoperation and the connection, as Paul was saying earlier, making sure that people have used the right classification and the right connections between the different data sets. So I'm going to stop there now and really hand back over to see if people are interested. The Golden Thread group that we've got now, these are the resources that we're putting together to explain to people, for example, the government standards that we can follow, and also to do checklists that we can follow as well. And the overall objective is to have a team of people who are sufficiently interested in this process to be able to do audits, if you're interested in doing that, on a paid basis. And the intention is that we're going to be able to award a Golden Thread aware badge, as it were, to people that have demonstrated that they're interested. So I think that's the process. So Richard, can I hand over to you to just finish off that recruiting bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody's interested in getting involved with the Golden Thread Task Force, as George said, it's kind of following on or ancillary, adjacent to the work the Golden Thread Group's doing. But it's rather more focused on, we're calling it aware, but it's a level of achievement, a level of knowledge, I suppose, really. If anybody's interested in getting involved in that or knowing more about that, as George said, there are opportunities in there for actually getting paid for some work as well. So if anybody's interested, just put task force in the chat and we'll get you invited for the upcoming meetings in June. I think the first one's June 12th.
Also, if people are working on projects where they're concerned about the risk, it seems to be a big risk of a rejection by the BSE, or BSR rather, then maybe flag that up as well, because you could be a client or a contractor that's actually concerned about what you what do you need to do? Where are the gaps? We could do a spot check audit, or the team could do a spot check audit to see whether what you've got at the moment is up for that. Mandeep.
Yeah, so I mean, this got this task force stuff is obviously that's the really kind of central to kind of what the kind of legislation is looking at in terms of the kind of finding the gaps basically. And there's a kind of one example where I've done that actually was for a kind of really large kind of housing association where they're about to purchase the building, so it wasn't nothing to do with the kind of gateways actually. And what we did, we just kind of analysed the information to kind of see what was kind of there and what was potentially missing. And over kind of several week process, actually, we found quite a few things were missing. So the housing association actually walked away from the purchase of that building. But obviously, this is becoming a lot more important now with the kind of building regulations extension period where kind of defective work can be kind of bought up or kind of reopened up for up to 10 years basically. Previously I think that was just a 2-year period. And as kind of I think it was Matt which mentioned earlier as well that this kind of information for the golden thread can be kind of drawn up at so many different kind of cases basically down the line. So I think we saw a scenario as well. There's a court case hearing ruling as well earlier this week, I believe it was, where a designer which had been bought out by AECOM had done some design work which was kind of obviously not up to scratch, and about 10 years later they found issues. So the court had ruled that AECOM were now liable because under section 5.1, I think it's regulation 130, parent companies can be found liable as well now, and the kind of obligation can transfer under the Building Safety Act to parent companies. So it's kind of like
Mandeep, I think that's a really, really important point because when I was at UK Reef last week, and there's a lot of discussion about this. You can imagine, can't you? Because people are becoming very concerned about the delays. But actually, the delays, certainly from what we've been told from the regulator, a lot of the delays are down to the fact that people just haven't provided the information that they're supposed to provide.
Yeah, exactly. And it's getting more and more important. Obviously, like I say, building regulations, that kind of defect period has extended to 10 years. Defective Premises Act obviously extended to 15 years from 6 years. And I've just I've just shared that link to the kind of article which talked about the kind of legacy defect claims, basically, and the designer, basically, that was responsible, structural engineer, URS. Basically, it was, and then they're being acquired by AECOM, but I think the company's going after them now, and the courts have ruled that that's a legitimate kind of way to reclaim the funds. So
and the interesting thing with that is that when I was talking to people, a common comment is, but when was the last time anybody was prosecuted? And that's a very, very common sort of observation, but I think actually it's a bit false because, it may be that the HSE don't have it may not actually prosecute you yet. But they've got 10 years. So if you've got a project where either maybe one of your other projects becomes under scrutiny, they then start to look at your others, then you've got a problem. The second thing is that this is a corporate responsibility. So therefore, arguably, you should declare it to your insurers and your shareholders that you're carrying a risk.
This is it. We had
sorry, hang on, Randy. One final thing is that when, from what I understand, when a building is acquired, the person that takes on the liability for the incomplete information. So the fire and emergency file, for example, I appreciate that's quite a narrow thing because building safety is about structure as well. But let's say just the fire and emergency file, which is quite easy to audit. If that information isn't adequate or isn't correct, then that's something that's a real no-brainer.
Yeah, just on that as well. So particularly finding emergency files. So have been requested by, when I was at Hydroc, I was requested by clients to actually do a gap analysis on the find emergency file as well. So people are kind of waking up to that. But when I did talk to law firm, it was Watson, Farley and Williams. I did a little seminar there, and they said that the thing is, it's not just kind of emerging issue with kind of faulty buildings now, buildings which have been built by somebody, and then say that contractor's been bought out, then that contractor would become liable for the buildings that that contractor had initially built in the past. So there's a liability when you're purchasing kind of contractor. There's liability when you're purchasing kind of portfolios of buildings, because any of those buildings could have kind of missing information in the golden thread and have a defect. And then there's liability when you're kind of purchasing like design teams, like we've just seen in that court case hearing as well. So the liability is just massive.
Okay, so we need to close off, but one of the things that I just wanted to finish with is one of the big challenges is that the regulations can be interpreted in lots of ways by different people. Right? And what we're trying to do within the task force is actually we've got the thick end of 80 or so people who are heavily involved in this, and they are in a good position to actually say what good looks like. Yeah. So if we can say what good looks like, then, and also do a process, establish a process that a landlord or a contractor can go through to try and verify that they've got the right information, then it means that there's an industry best practice to work to. So that's what we're asking, whether you would be interested in getting involved in, because that's what we want to have a team of people who can both specify that and also have a common way of interpreting it. The Miro board helps us with the legal side of things, or the contractual side of things, but from a data management perspective, if we can say this is the information we need to know about a smoke vent, this is the information we need to know where it is, who installed it, we need to know the manufacturer's model number and details, some basic things that we can then follow, because in my experience, going through O&Ms doesn't provide you with that information in a very clear way. And that's not a comment about the people that have compiled the O&Ms. It's actually down to the fact that the installation contractors probably aren't aware of what they really should be providing, because there's no consistency in terms of what information they need to follow. They're told to follow 19650, which is great, yeah, but the detail of what information do we need to have about a smoke damper or a fire door isn't clear. And therefore, we're in a position as a collective to actually determine that. So if you want to be involved in it, please come along to the first first proper meeting that we've got, which is on the 12th of June. But put your name in the chat, yeah, or not your name. Sorry, put Golden Thread Task Force.
Yeah, that's fine. Cheers.
Thank you, Mandy.
Okay, I think we're done.
Has that been useful, everybody?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, very useful,
thank you.
George. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank
Yeah,
you.
very, very useful. Thank you.
I think there's a message, George, if I can just say
Yeah.
something.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, please.
And that's that with regards to with what people receive. I know I sort of said something in the comments, but yeah, I mean, basically from an information manager's point of view, you get what you receive, as from my point of view. So please ask for what you need, and people like me will facilitate it. Information managers and whatever. And yeah, that was it.
Most definitely. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, it's about
Thanks, George.
everybody needs to be a bit proactive, don't they? Not just kind of sit waiting for it, maybe.
Yes, I sort of I put it in slightly joking terms that if you're preparing for a banquet, you don't get a stranger to go and buy the ingredients for you,
Sure.
because it's a huge undertaking that people are doing here, and it's incredibly important that it's done properly, because there are consequences for what actually happens. So yeah, it's excellent what is being done in this group, by actually defining what is a good set of information, I think, as George put it loosely. So yeah, that's my point of view.
Okay, guys, see you next time.
Thank you.
You'll get invites out soon, or see you at the Golden Thread Task Force on the 12th of June. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bye.
Thanks a
now.
lot.
Cheerio.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.